Lindsay, I believe it's Matouche, I also have trouble with names. When I first saw her present about this a couple years ago, the first thing that popped into my head was, how can we use this in the classroom? Because this is essentially a textbook on pavement maintenance and pavement rehabilitation on a website, and it's interactive. So there's a lot of good things going for it. So what I did is I incorporated it into two of my classes. The first one is a senior level required course. It's called Transportation Infrastructure. It is a fantastic course. I'm a big fan of it. And what we did is we created groups where every group looked at one maintenance treatment and one rehabilitation treatment and applied that across the entire Arkansas Department of Transportation network. I do not recommend doing that with any one treatment, but it did give the students an idea of what happens when you start applying maintenance and rehabilitation treatments to pavements. The second class that I introduced a project to was Sustainability and Civil Engineering. This is also a senior level course, but it was a technical elective. And what we did is we compared so-called conventional treatments, which we'll talk about a little bit more, to optimized treatments on the RDOT network. So what does RDOT usually use? They use a lot of chip seals, which is great. They use a lot of mill and fill, which is not as great. And then they do remove and replace, which in my mind is not the optimal thing to do. But we compared those to the different treatments that were available on roadresource.org. Now, of course, I am only as good as the people that I work with, so a big thank you to both Logan and Sadie. They did a tremendous amount of work with both these projects, and I couldn't have done a fraction of what happened without their help, so thank you to them. So for the first class, 4423, this is Transportation Infrastructure. We're going to focus on two different calculators on roadresource.org. The students go through all four of the calculators, but we're just going to focus on two of them in this presentation. The first is the life cycle cost, and that kind of explores what treatments will maximize the road life. And the second one was equivalent annualized cost, which is the true cost of pavement over time. As I mentioned, we did look at all four. The other two are remaining service life, which is RSL. And this concept is one of my favorite new units. This concept of, is your network gaining or losing life every year? I really, really like that concept. So I'm 100% behind that. And then also the cost benefit value, or CBV. And this is how you can, this is a tool that helps you prioritize what projects you're looking at. So I had 61 students in the group, or in the class, and I split them into groups. Each group had a maintenance treatment, each group had a rehabilitation treatment, and as I mentioned, I misspoke a little bit before, but for this presentation, we're just going to look at life cycle costs and remaining service life. The students looked at all four calculators, but it was a really nice exercise introducing them to these concepts. Of course, like any good study, we did have to have some assumptions and some notes. We just use the national average costs. So a lot of people who hear me talk about these numbers say, well, my area has different costs for materials, and that's completely understandable. And every region that this is done in will be slightly different, but we just use the national costs. We didn't do any regional adjustments. We also didn't use any salvage value. So this concept of, does a roadway, does a pavement structure have value in it at the end of the life? I think that's a very important concept, but roadresource.org did not use that. And that at the end of the day did penalize the treatments differently. So if you guys want to talk about that concept more, I'd be more than happy to later on, but I'm just putting that out there so we're all on the same page. And then again, for this class, this was an academic exercise. I do not promote putting one single treatment on an entire network. That is not how the treatments work on roadresource.org. But what it did do is it allowed all the students to use different treatments, and then when we showed the results in class, they could see their treatment up there and see how it related to the other treatments. So it kind of pointed the ship in the right direction. And we did use Arkansas Department of Transportation RDOT data, so thank you to RDOT for providing that data to us. Now, of course, the data they gave us was relatively complicated, and there's only so many things you can do in a 16-week semester, so we did simplify the RDOT network a little bit. We divided the highway types. I think they have 7 or 8 highway types total. We divided and collapsed those into freeways, multi-lane highways, and 2-lane highways, just so there's fewer bins for the students to put numbers in. And then we used the 2018 budget And this is the budget that's just used in Arkansas for maintaining or rehabilitating their roads. This is no new construction. So in 2018, they spent $236 million on their maintaining their network. And this is some of the results. So if you were to put a fog seal on the entire RDOT network, you can see that it would cost right around $7.5 billion over a 50-year lifespan. And imagine if you're a student, who here is a civil engineer? And if you could keep your hands up, who here heard of asphalt emulsions in your civil engineering degree? Yeah, that's what I thought. I'm really happy to see a couple hands still up. That means there's dedication out there. That is the minority. People who were in this class, though, they knew what asphalt emulsion was. They knew what pavement maintenance was. They knew what pavement rehabilitation was. And that's what I was excited about. So you can see here, this is how much it would cost if you'd only apply these treatments over the entire Arkansas network for a 50-year period. And that's in billions of dollars. And what was really interesting, what the students really enjoyed seeing, was then what do you do when you compare it to rehabilitation treatments? And in my mind, when I think about maintenance, I tend to think of keeping the surface in good condition. When I think about rehabilitation, I think about needing to rehabilitate the structure. So in my mind, that's kind of how it balances out. And you can see that the maintenance is cheaper, and then that makes sense. I don't think anyone in this room would disagree with it. Another thing, though, that's very interesting here that people will be a fan of is take a look at the price of the CIRs compared to minor and major mill and fills, and then the FDR compared to full depth remove and replace. These are treatments that could potentially save our agencies a lot of money. And this exercise showed the students two things. One, there's more solutions out there than what we're currently doing in the state of Arkansas. And two, if you start implementing those solutions, you could potentially save quite a bit of money. And obviously there's a lot of simplifications here. Our network is very complex. I'm fully aware of this, but this shows the direction the boat can go in. Now here's my new favorite unit, the remaining service life. Whenever I'm on a long drive with my wife, I start talking about remaining service life. She goes out like that, and that's pretty much it. But I think about it a lot. So remaining service life has the units of lane mile years. So let's say we have 1 lane mile and we don't do anything to it. We just let it sit. That means that our network has lost 1 lane mile year. So over a 1-year period, your network has lost 1 lane mile. But let's say you take that 1 lane mile and you apply some sort of preservation treatment that extends the road, that extends the service life 4 years. That means that your remaining service life has a 3 lane mile year gain. So this is a relatively simple concept. When you start applying it to an entire network, it really kind of explodes on itself and becomes a little bit more complex. So if we look here, again, at both the maintenance and rehabilitation options, about how many lane mile years are either gained or lost, you can see it's pretty incredible how quickly these numbers start decreasing when you move away from the fog seals and the crack seals and you move down to those HMA-based layers. And then this absolutely shocked me. I'm not sure how popular this graph will be in this room, but only 2 rehabilitation treatments had a positive lane mile year on the entire RDOT network. And that was CIR and minor mill and fill. All the rest of them had a negative lane mile year impact on RDOT's network. This doesn't mean that we shouldn't use anything below 0. Absolutely not, because I guarantee you there are roads out there in Arkansas's network that need FDR, that need CIR. They need these rehabilitation treatments. But the point is that continuing to let roads decay to that point and always letting them decay to that point, you're going to be heading down the wrong road long term. And these numbers showed that in this graph. So for the 4423, this is the first class. Again, this was applying 1 single treatment over an entire network. We explored these 4 calculators. We found that many of the non-standard maintenance and rehabilitation treatments saved cost. Rejuvenating fog seals obviously did pretty good, but even CIR. If you apply CIR to the entire RDOT network over time, your network will be in better condition. And that's incredible because we don't do CIR in Arkansas. So So if any of you guys are interested in introducing CIR to Arkansas, please talk to me, because I've been trying to talk to them about using it, and I have not had a whole lot of success. And then there's those 4 groupings that you saw as well. I didn't talk a whole lot about those whole groupings. They said I had 3.5 hours to talk, but then someone offered me $100 for 5 extra minutes, so I have very confused messages. But so I'll try and keep it a little brief. I didn't talk about the groupings, but you did see those little dotted lines around the groupings. And I thought those were interesting because sometimes it's a little overwhelming for agencies to go to a website that has 21 different treatments on it. It's like, well, where do you start? There's 21 of them, and they all talk about different PCIs and all these different things. So by kind of grouping them together, that at least allows you to understand that you can segment them a little bit. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Now, as I've mentioned multiple times, and this is being recorded, so I want to mention it again, it is not practical to use one single treatment on an entire network. I do not recommend that. So for the next class, we thought about how can we take multiple treatments and try and optimize them. And that's what we did in the Sustainability and Civil Engineering class. Now, one of the things we did do is we created a unit. It was called the Existing Service Life. And this is the age of the pavement in terms of the condition. We also created what we call T-Pres, and this is the time to achieve what we call pavement preservation, which I'll define here in a minute. And then we looked at conventional treatments, which I'll also define, and then we looked at different combinations of those optimal treatments. So different combinations of those rejuvenating fog seals, crack seals, slurry seals, CIR, FDR, those type of treatments in order to work on RDOT's network. This is, as I mentioned, a technical elective. Not everyone is as passionate about sustainability and civil engineering as I am. But there were 14 students in there, which I was really happy about. It's a great group, and we explored the different types of optimized treatments. So this first unit we came up is what we call the existing service life. And basically what we're trying to do is we're trying to capture the amount of times that pavement have been in service. And what we do with this then is we multiply the age of the time they've been in service by the length of the network. So here's a table, and you will be quizzed on this. You can't go to the wine social tonight unless you pass that quiz. But you can see here basically what we did is we broke down the PCIs into A, B, C, D, and F. That's how RDOT used to manage their network. We looked at the average life that you have in each one of those PCI grades, and then we simply multiplied that average life by the length of each different type of highway network. So the first one was the freeway, and you can see our freeway ESL there. And then we did the same calculation with our multi-lane and our 2-lane highways. And you can see something that every agency struggles with is there are a lot of 2-lane highways out there in very poor condition. And this existing service life shows that quite clearly. Those 2-lane ESLs are huge. There are over 150,000 for both of those. There are a lot of 2-lane highways in Arkansas that are in a PCI of D or an F. But this is just a way to kind of quantify what is the condition of our pavement, what is sitting out there as we speak. And the reason that we wanted to come up with that existing service life is what we did is we divided it then by the remaining service life. And that's from the roadresource.org calculator, the remaining service life calculator, and that gave us a number called T-Pres. And again, there are a bunch of assumptions behind this, but what we assumed is if you would do a certain set of treatments to try and fix your network, you would be able to take all those treatments to get some sort of remaining service life number. If you take your existing service life of your network and divide it by that remaining service life network, we said that was an estimation of how long it would take for your pavement to get to T-Pres. And T-Pres is the length of time for your pavement network to reach pavement preservation, and we define that as our entire network is either a PCA or a PCIA or PCIB, so either very good or good condition, and your RSL was 0 net lane mile years. So it's not getting any worse, it's not getting any better, but if your entire network is either very good or good, you want it to stay that way. So you're not trying to make it get better, but you don't want it to get worse. So I would also love to have a discussion about whether or not this is a viable unit, because obviously pavements deteriorate over time, but then we're also fixing the deteriorated pavements and making them better, and then we're starting to preserve those. So it's kind of like a teeter-totter. You're trying to fix pavements, but then you're trying to make them better, and you're trying to balance that out while keeping your network going in a better condition. So this is what we did. When we talked about optimizing the network, this is what we assumed RDOT currently does. Now, RDOT does not do this because RDOT does not do anything to their PCI-A or PCI-B roads. They let them sit there until they become a PCI-C, a PCI-D, or a PCI-F. But let's just say RDOT put a chip seal, which is something they use a lot, on their PCI-A and B roads. So these are good condition roads, and you're applying a treatment to keep that road in a good condition. They apply a minor mill and fill to their PCI-C and PCI-D roads, and then they do a full depth remove and replace to all their PCI-F roads. So let's just assume this is RDOT's treatment plan and how they carry it out. Now what we did, this kind of gives a little window into some of the assumptions that we made when we were using the website. What we did is we assumed first that we treated the same percentage of PCI-D and PCI-F roads. So we weren't just going only for PCI-F and trying to drag those all up. We were also fixing some of the PCI-D roads and pushing those up. We made sure to always treat 100% of the PCI-A roads. So all of those roads that are in that very good condition, the PCI-A, we made sure we were treating those with a chip seal every 6 years. Because in theory, then they should stay at a PCI-A condition. And then what we tried to do is maximize the RSL with those two parameters in mind. We'd maximize the remaining service life and keep it in the budget. Once we did that, we could figure out the T-Pres for each highway segment. So we used the same highway segment as the first class. We used freeways, we used multi-lane highways, and we used two-lane highways. So we used those same highway segments. We calculated the T-Pres. We ensured that the PCI, D, and F roads could be treated within the T-Pres. We didn't want them continuously bottoming out and not being able to get out of that D and F condition. And then what we needed to do is we had to determine the preservation budget to keep roads at that PCI-A. We did that with the freeways, and once all those roads were in PCI-A and B, we calculated how much that would cost, and we shifted that money down to the multi-lane highways. Now, I just wanted to mention, and I'll go through an example of that here in a second, but I just wanted to mention RDOT does not currently do this. I've told them that they should look into doing this, but they don't currently do this. So this is what we did. We applied a chip seal to PCI A and Bs, a minor mill and fill to C and D, and a full depth remove and replace for PCI F. Again, treating these PCI A and B roads are a key part of pavement preservation, not letting them fall down into the C, D, or F condition, because we're taking care of the roads that are already in good condition. And then what we did is we allocated by vehicle miles traveled the amount of money to be put toward freeways and multi-lane highways and two-lane highways. So this is another problem that agencies have, is almost all of our traffic, our highest volumes by far, are on the freeways. So of course we need to spend a lot of resources toward that. Well, we have a lot of two-lane roads with a relatively low amount of traffic, but we also need to take care of those. So we tried to normalize it, and we basically appropriated the amount of money based on the vehicle miles traveled. So there's fewer freeways or interstates. That means that kind of canceled out the higher traffic volume. There's more lanes on the two-lane highways, so that had a little bit more. And again, RDOT does not do this, but what we did here is the freeways, they would get 1929 freeway lane miles treated within the budget for PCI A and B. C and D would get 682 lane miles treated, and then PCI F would have 55 lane miles treated. Now, if we took the budget for two-lane, multi-lane highways and just kept that original budget, that's the circled number. But once the freeways were in either an A or a B condition, and that money then was shifted down to multi-lane highways, you can see you get that adjusted budget. So once our higher volume roads are in PCI A or B, you figure out how much it costs to keep it like that, then you take the difference and shift it down to the next one down. And we'll go through an example of this. And then after the multi-lane was in pavement preservation, we shifted it down to the two-lane miles, the two-lane highways. So this is how it worked. So we estimated by dividing the ESL by the RSL, we estimated it would take 2.21 years to get all of our freeways in the state of Arkansas into a PCI A or B condition. That seems relatively straightforward. And our budget was about $94 million for that. And again, that was a balance between the volume of traffic and the number of lane miles, and we did that by vehicle lane miles. Now, keeping it, just applying chip seals to the entire network in A and B condition would only cost just under $9 million a year. And that's where the savings comes in, because if our freeways are in preservation mode, we can then shift that extra money down to the multi-lane highways. So the multi-lane highways started at $49 million, but after we shifted the difference between the preservation, the adjusted, and then we subtracted the preservation, and we added the $48 million, we get about $134 million. So it would take about 4 years to get our multi-lane highways to a PCI A and B. And then going down, we did the same thing for the 2-lane highways. And with the current budget, we could not address all of the 2-lane highways in the state of Arkansas. And regardless of what state you're from, you've probably heard that many, many times. But if your freeways and multi-lane highways are just in this preservation mode, just being treated in an A or B condition, you actually are able to do that, because all of that extra money goes down into the 2-lane highways, and the budget changes to over $216 million. After 92 years, the state of Arkansas could, in theory, have all their roads in A or B condition, and they would save $147 million a year on their maintenance budget. And I had a 5-minute warning about 4 minutes ago. No, it's 1. It was exactly 4 minutes ago. But I assume that's a metric minute, which means I have 10 minutes. No, I'll just briefly, so this is conventional. We went through the exact same exercise, but we used a rejuvenating fog seal, microsurfacing, minor mill and fill, CIR, and full depth remove and replace for freeways. For multi-lane highways, we used rejuvenating fog seals, scrub seals, CIR, and FDR. And then for 2-lane highways, we used rejuvenating fog seals, chip seals, CIR, and FDR. So I went through those tables really fast. The highlight of those tables is we moved away from just minor mill and fill and remove and replace, and we moved into using slurry seals, microsurfacing, CIR, and FDR. And this is what happens. It only takes 46 years using those optimized treatments. So using a blend of those treatments on roadresource.org, we reduced the time it took to get to pavement preservation from 92 to 46 years, and we're saving $155 million. So my conclusions in my metric minute: pavement preservation is your entire network in good condition with a remaining service life of 0 lane mile years. Using those conventional treatments, it would have taken RDOT 92 years to get there, but they would save $146 million. Using those optimized treatments, those blends of the other treatments that you find on roadresources.org, it'd take 46 years and you'd save $155 million. So are we taking questions now or afterwards?
Questions now, yes.
So if you guys have questions now, I'd love to take them. Or if you'd like to talk more afterwards, I have all these tables printed out and we can pour over the numbers. Yes, sir.
Is Chuck Bennett not an in-place recycling proponent, and do they pay attention to what's going on in Mississippi and Mississippi State and our neighbor?
Yeah, so the question was, is RDOT a fan of in-place like recycling techniques, CIR and FDR? And then the second half of the question was, are they kind of tracking what states around them are doing? And I would say, I'm going to put my diplomatic hat on here. RDOT's a very conservative state with their highway network. They feel like they understand what they're using, and it takes a long time for them to entertain and fold in new types of technologies. I'll stick with the microphone answer. And we can talk more about that later away from the microphone.
If you ask a question, please ask for the microphone. That's easier for everybody to hear you. Any more questions?
Nothing.
I should use a microphone.
So the question is, what is a minor mill and fill? If I recall off the top of my head, a minor mill and fill is 1.5 inches and a major mill and fill is 3 inches. Those could be off by a ½ inch either way. But there is a designation on roadresource.org for minor and major, and I believe that's what it's.
Recycling in the original mix, but didn't use it as part of your fixing.
So, and the point was, the hot in place recycling was introduced in the first class, but it wasn't used in the second class. And I actually only showed one example from the second class. We assigned different groupings of treatments to different groups, and I just showed the one. But hot in place recycling would definitely be a good option in addition to the CIRs and the FDRs.